The chill wind of early spring clawed at the English countryside on April 15, 1943, as the first rays of a reluctant sun pierced the low-hanging clouds over RAF Halesworth. There, on the rain-slicked dispersal pans, stood the hulking silhouettes of 12 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, their olive-drab fuselages glistening with dew, radial engines still ticking with residual heat from dawn patrols. The air hummed with the faint, acrid tang of high-octane fuel and cordite, while ground crews in oil-stained coveralls swarmed like ants, winching 500-pound bombs beneath the wings of these behemoths, machines that looked more like armored trucks with propellers than fighters of the sky. Pilots from the 4th Fighter Group, their flight suits zipped tight against the bite of the North Sea gale, climbed into cockpits that swallowed them whole, the harnesses creaking under the weight of parachutes and survival vests. Engines coughed to life one by one, belching blue smoke that twisted into the mist, their Pratt & Whitney or 2800s roaring like caged lions as the props blurred into silver discs. Taxiing into the wind, the jugs lumbered down the runway, heavy and deliberate, before hauling themselves skyward with a thunderous surge that shook the very earth, bound for the coast of France, where the Luftwaffe waited, unaware that this ungainly intruder would soon rewrite the rules of aerial dominion. If these forgotten stories from the cockpit of history stir something in your soul, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell icon. You won't want to miss the next dispatch from the front lines of the past. It was a moment pregnant with the weight of untested promise, for the P-47 Thunderbolt had arrived in the European theater not as a whisper, but as a bellow, a radical departure from the sleek, nimble pursuits that had defined the air war thus far. Conceived in the fevered drawing boards of Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, Long Island, amid the industrial frenzy of 1940, the Thunderbolt was the brainchild of Alexander Kartvelli, a Georgian immigrant whose vision fused brute American engineering with the lessons of Pearl Harbor's shock. First taking to the air on May 6, 1941, with test pilot Lowry Brabham at the controls, the XP-47B prototype shattered expectations, clocking 410 miles per hour at 30,000 feet, a speed that belied its 13,000-pound frame. Yet, as production ramped to a staggering 15,716 airframes by war's end, the P-47 entered combat shadowed by skepticism, not just from its own pilots, but from the enemy across the channel. The Luftwaffe, weaned on the lithe grace of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the predatory sweep of the Focke-Wulf Fw 190, viewed these newcomers through binoculars from their forward bases in occupied France. What they saw was no aristocrat of the heavens, but a ponderous brute, a radial-engine Goliath with a bulbous cowling, elliptical wings spanning 40 feet, and a fuselage so rotund it earned derision as the flying milk bottle or jug, short for juggernaut, though some whispered flying bathtub, in the mess halls of JG-2 and JG-26. To the German aces, hardened by the Battle of Britain and the Eastern Front's meat grinder, this American interloper seemed a joke, a gas-guzzling relic unfit for the ballet of dogfights they had mastered. Why chase grace when the skies demanded poetry? Little did they know, this moment marked the pivot from elegance to inexorability, where the Thunderbolt's arrival signaled not just a new aircraft, but the inexhaustible tide of American might cresting over Europe. In the broader arc of the war, as the 8th Air Force's daylight bombing campaign faltered under relentless FW-190 assaults, losing 81 bombers in a single week of October 1943 alone, the P-47 was no mere escort, it was the hammer forged to shatter the Luftwaffe's stranglehold, ensuring that B-17s and B-24s could penetrate the Reich's defenses without bleeding dry. Its mattering was etched in the ledgers of survival. Without the jug, the strategic bombing offensive might have crumbled, prolonging the agony by months if not years. High above the pastoral quilt of Normandy that fateful April afternoon, the contrast unfolded like a cruel jest scripted by fate. The German pilots of 2/JG-2, led by the veteran Oberleutnant Kurt Bühligen, circled their charges, Heinkel He 111 bombers droning toward England laden with retaliation payloads. From their vantage in the Bf 109 G4S, agile as falcons with their Daimler-Benz engines purring at 35,000 feet, they spotted the intruders first, a gaggle of 12 P-47 CS, their bubble canopies glinting dully against the overcast, climbing ponderously from the west. Laughter crackled over the radios, clipped and incredulous, as Bühligen's wingman, Lieutenant Hans Eckhard Bob, keyed his transmitter. Look at the Americaner, flying cows with wings. They waddle like drunkards at a beer hall. Expectations burned bright in their minds, honed by months of feasting on unwary Spitfires and P-38 Lightnings, whose turning radii they could exploit like matadors dodging bulls. The FW-190s, with their radial engines of BMW 801s, were kings of the bounce, diving from the sun, slashing with 20mm cannon fire, then vanishing into the clouds before retaliation could muster. Against such phantoms, the lumbering P-47 promised easy pickings. Too slow to turn, too heavy to climb quickly, its vaunted turbo-supercharger a gimmick that whistled futilely in the thin air. They envisioned a rout, a brief skirmish where the jugs would scatter like startled pigeons, their pilots bailing out over the channel to bob in their Mae Wests amid the debris. Victory would be swift, morale-boosting. A reminder that the Reich's Eagles still ruled the ether, even as Allied boots massed on southern shores for what would become Operation Torch. But reality descended with the ferocity of a summer squall. As the formations converged at 28,000 feet, the P-47s did not weave or jink in futile evasion. Instead, they held formation with iron discipline, their pilots, men like Captain John C. Meyer of the 352nd Squadron, throttling back to bait the trap. The Germans pounced 20 FW-190 screaming down in a classic Schrägmusik dive, 30mm shells stitching the sky. Yet the first bursts glanced off the Thunderbolt's armored bellies, the 0.5-inch plate beneath the cockpit shrugging away impacts that would have eviscerated a lighter foe. One jug, piloted by Lieutenant Ralph Groves, took a direct hit to the wing root. Fuel sprayed, but the radial engine, that indomitable 18-cylinder beast generating 2,000 horsepower, coughed once and roared on, its self-sealing tanks denying the flames purchase. The Americans did not flee. They rolled into a wide, banking turn, diving to gain speed, their airspeeds climbing to 450 miles per hour as the turbochargers whined in defiance of the altitude. Now the hunters became quarry. From the official after-action report of the 78th Fighter Group, filed that evening at Halesworth, enemy aircraft closed to 300 yards, opening fire with cannon and machine guns. Our element leader, Captain, redacted, executed a steep dive to the left, attaining 500 miles per hour indicated, and positioned for a stern attack. The P-47's true venom lay not in grace, but in wrath. 8 Browning and /M 2.50 caliber machine guns, synchronized to harmonize at 300 yards, each spitting 850 rounds per minute in a storm of lead that could shred aluminum like tissue. As the FW-190s overshot, bellies exposed in their zeal, the jugs reversed roles. Groves, his aircraft trailing glycol vapor, squeezed the trigger, a symphony of tracers arcing like 4th of July fireworks, 3,400 rounds per gun pod hammering home. An FW-190 disintegrated mid-banks, its pilot, Feldwebel Erich Hahn, never to file his combat claim, his wreckage spiraling into a wheat field near Cannes, where French peasants would later pry Luftwaffe Eagle insignias from the twisted spar. This was no isolated thunderclap. It echoed across the channel in the weeks that followed as the P-47's baptism forged a legend in blood and fire. By May 1943, the 8th Air Force's fighter groups, 4th, 56th, 78th, and 353rd, had transitioned fully to the jug, their squadrons swelling to 72 aircraft each, a testament to the production lines churning out 800 Thunderbolts monthly from Republic's Farmingdale plant and subcontractors like Curtiss-Wright. Factual records from the Army Air Force's Statistical Digest paint a portrait of escalating dominance. In June alone, P-47 pilots claimed 48 aerial victories against just 4 losses to enemy aircraft, a 12-to-1 ratio that stunned intelligence officers. Consider the mission logs of the 56th Fighter Group under Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke, a tactical savant whose Wolfpack philosophy eschewed the romantic dogfight for ruthless efficiency. Zemke, a wiry Californian with a mustache like a dueling scar, had studied the Luftwaffe's playbook during his pre-war stint as an observer with the Luftwaffe itself. "We won't turn with them," he briefed his pilots on a foggy morning in July 1943, chalkboard sketches showing wide orbits and altitude advantages. "We'll use the jug's legs, dive, hit and run." The results were surgical. On August 17, during Operation Argument's big week raids on German industry, the 56th's P-47DS, now fitted with extended-range drop tanks holding 200 gallons of 100-octane fuel, escorted 283 B-17s to Schweinfurt, tangling with 200 FW-190s and Bf-109s over the Ruhr. Official claims tallied 23 destroyed, 9 probables and 11 damaged, with losses confined to flak and mechanicals. Pilot Robert S. Johnson in his memoir Thunderbolt, recalled the visceral poetry. "I saw the lead 190 nose up trying to climb away. I closed to 150 yards and gave him everything I had. The 8 guns bucked like a mule, and his cockpit erupted in a flash of orange. He rolled over, smoking, and plunged straight down, right wing gone at the root. Yet it was in the crucible of October 1943 that the Thunderbolt's scorned silhouette etched terror into Luftwaffe hearts. As Allied bombers hammered Regensburg's Messerschmitt factories, Zenke's 56th prowled the fringes, their jugs painted in invasion stripes for deception. Over a span of 30 grueling days, from October 4 to November 3, the Wolfpack dismantled 39 confirmed German fighters, a feat corroborated by gun camera footage and cross-verified by bomber gunners. The gray, wind-scoured dawn of October 4 set the tone. 12 P-47s bounced a gaggle of JG-20 FW-190s near Emden, the Americans diving from 30,000 feet in a 70-degree angle, airspeed spiking to 520 miles per hour. Lieutenant John Shattuck's report, archived in the National Archives Record Group 18, details the melee, enemy formation of 15, led by yellow-nosed 190s. I selected trailing element, fired 400 rounds from 250 yards. Strikes on fuselage and engine. Aircraft exploded in mid-air, debris passing within 50 feet. By month's end, the tally stood, 22 FW-190s, 14 BF-109s, and 3 Ju-88 night fighters, with aces like Francis Gabby Gabreski adding 5 personal scalps. German records, pieced from surviving JG-2 war diaries captured at Cherbourg, betray the unraveling. Oberstleutnant Joseph Priller, commander of JG-26, noted in an October 14 dispatch, "The American radials are no longer the lumbering fools we dismissed. They strike like wolves from the sun, their guns a wall of fire that spares nothing." Priller, who would survive 1,700 sorties to pen post-war memoirs, admitted the shift. "We expected fragility, we found fortitude." The P-47 turns the sky into a graveyard for the unwary. Woven through these ledgers are the human threats, the documented voices that humanize the statistics. Take Lieutenant Colonel David C. Schilling, Zenke's deputy, whose calm drawl masked a killer's instinct. In a letter to his wife dated September 28, 1943, preserved in the Schilling papers at the Air Force Historical Research Agency, he wrote, "The jug takes a pounding that would fell a lesser bird. Yesterday I nursed one home with half the oil tank gone, flak holes like Swiss cheese in the tail. She flew on sheer American grit." Or consider the Luftwaffe's side, glimpsed in the interrogation transcripts of captured pilot Lieutenant Heinz Barr, downed by a P-47 on November 2 and debriefed at Dulag Luft. "We called them Milchken, milk cans in the briefings, laughing at their fat bellies. But when those 8 Brownings open up, it's like flying into a hurricane of hornets. No turn, no evasion, just lead everywhere." These accounts, cross-referenced against the 8th Air Force's monthly intelligence summaries, reveal a kill rate that climbed from 4.6:1 in mid-1943 to 10:1 by D-Day, with P-47s accounting for 3,752 confirmed destructions overall, more than any other U.S. fighter. Ground kills added another 4,000 vehicles, from panzers in the bocage to locomotives choking the Ardennes rails, the Jug's 2,500-pound bomb load and 8 HVR rockets turning it into a flying artillery piece. Data from the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey Volume 4 quantifies the pivot. Luftwaffe sortie rates plummeted 40% in the last 6 months of 1943, as aces like Walter Nowotny fell to Thunderbolt guns, their replacements green and overwhelmed. This onslaught did more than tally scores. It transformed the very ethos of aerial combat, eroding the Luftwaffe's ideological fortress of Aryan supremacy in the skies. For the German pilots, schooled in Richthofen's dueling code, where chivalry met Darwinian selection, the P-47's advent shattered illusions of inevitability. What began as mockery, a psychological bulwark against the encroaching horde, curdled into dread, a recognition that their elegant predators were outmatched by democratic mass. Oberleutnant Erich Rudorfer, holder of 222 victories and survivor of 1,000 missions, confided in a 1970s interview archived by the Bundesarchiv, "The FW-190 was our sword, sharp and true. The American Jug? A club, blunt, unbreakable, swung by hands that never tired. It taught us that will alone cannot defy the factory." For the Americans, the shift was revelatory too. Pilots who once chafed at the P-47's 305 miles per hour turning speed at low level now embraced its virtues, forging a doctrine of energy fighting that prioritized boom and zoom over scissors maneuvers. Zenke's innovation, flying in loose finger formations, 4-plane elements stacked for mutual cover, became gospel, exported to the 9th and 12th Air Forces, where Jugs ravaged Rommel's Afrika Korps supply lines in Tunisia, destroying 500 trucks in February 1943 alone. The ideology morphed. No longer the lone wolf but the pack, mirroring the industrial democracy that birthed 300,000 aircraft in 4 years, each a vote in the ballot of firepower. In the cockpits, this bred resilience. Survival rates for P-47 pilots hit 92%, per AAF medical reports, fostering a confidence that bled into the infantry below, where GIs facing Panther tanks whispered of jugs on call, like talismans. Throughout these tempests, one element recurs like a leitmotif in a Wagnerian opera. The staccato thunder of the .50 caliber machine guns, that relentless chatter representing not just lethality, but the boundless abundance of a nation unbound. 8 barrels per wing, fed by belts of incendiary tracer armor-piercing rounds, over 2,500 per sortie, unleashing a biblical deluge that could saturate a 40-foot kill zone in seconds. It was the sound of Detroit's assembly lines made manifest, each burst to echo of the 100 million rounds produced monthly at plants like Winchester and New Haven, where women in kerchiefs stamped casings under fluorescent hum. To the German ear, it was no mere gunfire but democracy's drumbeat, indiscriminate, inexhaustible, drowning out the poetic whine of their MG-131s. In Johnson's Thunderbolt he described it thus: "The guns spoke and the world listened, a storm of steel that said, 'We have more than enough and we will spend it all for this.'" Over Bremen on October 8, as Zenke's formation shredded a dozen Bf-109s, the .50's roar reverberated through the formation, a sonic emblem of plenty amid scarcity, where Luftwaffe mechanics scavenged parts from wrecks while American quartermasters overflowed hangars with spares. It symbolized the chasm, one side rationing fuel at 87 octane, the other guzzling 115 grade from pipelines snaking across the Atlantic. In the hedgerows of Normandy, June 1944, as P-47DS of the 365th Group strafed Wehrmacht columns retreating from Utah Beach, that chatter felled 1,200 vehicles in a week, per SGF reports. Abundance not as excess, but as equalizer, turning the tide for doughboys pinned by 88mm fire. Even in quiet moments, nursing a perforated jug home over the wash, pilots would finger the triggers, the dry click a reminder. This was no aristocrat's rapier, but the people's barrage, forged in the plenty of free enterprise, where innovation flowed like the Mississippi, unchecked and unending. As the P-47's shadow lengthened over the fatherland, culminating in the 1,200 sorter swarms of February 1945, when jugs of the 406th Group vaporized the Remagen Bridge in a 2,500-pound bomb salvo, the war's aerial narrative bent inexorably toward vindication. The mocked beast had claimed 7,456 enemy aircraft, half in furious air-to-air clashes, its loss rate a mocking 0.7% of sorties flown, per the AAF's final audit. Aces like Gabreski with 28 kills transitioned seamlessly to P-51s, but it was the jug that broke the Luftwaffe's back, paving the skies for unconditional surrender. In the epilogue of this saga, as the last Thunderbolts taxi to hush on battered fields near Reims, their props winding down to silence, one cannot help but reflect on the deeper cadence beneath the roar. The P-47 was more than metal and fury, it was the embodiment of a truth as old as the Republic itself, that freedom's greatest weapon is not the blade of one, but the flood of many, an abundance born not of conquest but of conviction. In those 8 guns' unyielding hail, we hear the pulse of a democracy that outproduces tyranny, outendures despair, and outshines the stars over a liberated continent. For in the end, the jug did not merely fly, it thundered a promise, that when the people rise with plenty in their hearts and resolve in their hands, even the mightiest eagle folds its wings before the storm. And in that storm we find not just victory, but the enduring song of what it means to be free, relentless, unyielding, forever abundant.